What's going on, guys? We got Clark Taylor from Wrestling Republic. We're back with another daily edition of the daily broadcast. It's Saturday, January 7th, 2023, and I'm just stoked to be here. It's been a fun week in wrestling all around. Got a couple of my esteemed colleagues from the good old WR here with me today. I got Anthony Ricciardi from Philly, Head of Opinions. You guys all know him. My co-host on Sold Separately, coming soon to a podcast forum near you. And second on the ones and twos, super producer, my co-host of the Republic Ramble and the head of reviewing, Coby Galenzoski. How you guys doing today?
Doing all right.
Absolutely. I mean, it is Saturday. Can't be too bad, right, guys? All right, so let's get right in. We got some topics to talk about today. We've got plenty to talk about. I mean, it's been a heck of a week in wrestling. Vince McMahon back. New Dynamite stuff, all of that. But I was going to get into something kind of specific almost right out of the gates. And that is with the imminent potential sale of WWE, if you can call it that, the idea that it could be sold anytime now, next 3 months. A lot of places have reported. A lot of company names have been thrown out there. We've got Endeavor. We've got, Comcast. We've got plenty of choices in that regard, but I had an idea yesterday and we were kind of talking about it. Is it possible that one Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gets involved in an acquisition like this and puts his fingerprints on something like this? So I'm going to start with Anthony. Do you have any interest? And I don't even want to necessarily hear just the direct answer on do you think he will? But let's go with if he did. Do you think the WWE would look significantly different? Do you think he would be a great addition at the top business-wise and things like that? How do you feel it would look if The Rock were to do something like that?
I mean, for me, my only question would be, does The Rock even have time to commit to WWE? He's got his acting career. He bought the XFL from Vince, so obviously that's a tie-in there. His family has ties to the wrestling business. So the question is, does he have the time to do it? And if he would fully commit to it? I think another question is, if they're looking to sell the company, and I'm going to eventually have this in a piece that goes up on Monday on the site, are they looking for somebody to buy it and let them continue to run it? Because they've done that with the UFC. Dana's still running it despite having a new owner. Would the McMahons want that? Do they want the company to be private again? I think that's a possibility too, because there's been a lot of scrutiny on the company as a publicly traded company. And if you go private in your subsidiary, a little bit more, you can hide some things as far as disclosure. But The Rock owning it would be interesting. I'm not going to say I don't think it's a bad move, but I just don't. I don't know how involved he's going to have time to be able to do any of that. That would be my biggest question.
I totally hear you on that, and I agree with where you're coming from on talk about a guy with a busy schedule, right? I mean, that is, and a project like this, he would have to definitely push another few things to the side. But I also do want to mention we have another guest here today, Ignacio from Take It to the Table, back on the show once again. It's good to have you, my friend. Just to catch you up real quick, we're currently talking the potential of with the WWE potentially being sold. And this is basically a hypothetical conversation. But if The Rock were to get involved, maybe through WME, maybe through Endeavor, where he's had ties in the past, maybe through a consortium or something like that, would that be something as a fan you think you'd be interested in as far as seeing what he would do with the WWE from a business perspective and marketing as well?
Okay.
Also, welcome to the show. You take your time, by the way. If you're still getting set up, Coby, if you have an opinion too, you're good. Perfect.
Yeah, keep on going.
Yeah, Coby, you want to give us your take on that? What do you think about The Rock's involvement in the potential sale of the WWE?
For the potential sale of the WWE, I think it is something to talk about, The Rock being involved, but I don't like. I mean, it's still the question: is he going to be ready? Is he going to be able to do something of this stature, or is he just going to be something of a small minor consultant or something. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to take a big position unless he's really like trying to wind down his acting. Or like, I mean, yes, he's made enough money if you want to go that way. He's made enough money, he could really just take a break and do whatever, but theoretically he's going to keep going for the next probably 10 years at least. But I don't think he needs to be, if you want to view it that way. I don't think he needs to be involved in the purchase of the WWE, but I mean, only time will tell if he actually is.
It would be a hell of a full circle moment, though, for him, when his family's tied to the business, to actually turn around and buy or be involved with WWE. I mean, obviously he doesn't have the money to buy it outright himself, but as part of a group, almost like Magic Johnson with the Dodgers and stuff like that. I mean, it would be very full circle for him. And quite frankly, his acting career, he's an action star. He's getting up there. I don't know how much, the DC thing kind of fell apart with him. Would he commit full time to running the company? Maybe. I mean, it's a possibility. I don't know.
That's the most interesting part to me is I would just wonder how much of his hands he would want to have on the product. I mean, with his creative mind, I don't know that he would ever be bad for WWE if he wanted to be involved in creative. I think he and Triple H, obviously, we saw how they worked together in the Attitude Era with their own rivalry. Inside those, that might be a dream team for booking.
And they're very close now.
And they're much closer. Yeah. They're much closer than they had ever been before. I think that dynamic is something that isn't to be overlooked. I don't necessarily think that The Rock is the front runner to acquire the company, but it was just a talking point that I thought was worth bringing up because he's always looming when it comes to his ties to the WWE. And in another roundabout way, you have the bloodline and the family ties there, but he's also wrestling family, right? Oh, yeah. In the sense where I think there'd be a comfortability for Vince selling to a group with The Rock involved by comparison to maybe another corporation.
And the big thing with that is Vince was adamant that he has final say, obviously because he has the largest shares. So, quite frankly, the front runner who's ever Vince wants in that spot, it's Vince's call at the end of the day on if he's selling the company, who he's selling it to.
And I think that's one of the other most fascinating parts is we almost forgot after everything that happened last year with Vince stepping down, he's still the majority shareholder.
Isn't it like 80? Isn't it like 80% voting, something like that?
That's quite a it's a big number, and it's quite a bit of stroke, for lack of a better term. That's quite a bit of pull when it comes to even a publicly traded company like that, and it's such a major factor in this whole narrative that isn't to be overlooked. At the end of the day, he still owns the most shares. Coby, did you have any more thoughts on this? And then Ignacio, if you want to jump in, feel free as well.
I mean, no, I don't think I had anything else to say about it. Like there's not too much to expand upon that we haven't already said.
Definitely. Ignacio?
Do you have anything, Ignacio?
Yeah, I just think like right now, like Rock's just really concentrating on using WWE as a platform to launch his football league. And maybe other future movie endeavors he has, as terrible as they are. They're still paying him to do them, so I guess, whatever. Yeah, man, I don't think he has any interest in owning a wrestling company, WWE or otherwise. But I'll address something. I'll address this, is that I agree with like 90% or 5%, 95% of what Ben said on the show yesterday about the companies that are in line to acquire WWE, NBC, NBC Universal, Comcast, Fox, and I guess you can throw Disney in there because they're still looming, I think, and Endeavor. What I didn't disagree, two things, and it's kind of gonna go off of what Anthony was mentioning earlier. But the first thing is that I don't agree that Endeavor is the front runner. I think it's NBC Universal, just based on the 40 years of history that they have with WWE, with USA, Saturday Night's Main Event, Dick Ebersol, who is the head of NBC Sports.
Yes.
So I think they're probably the front runner. And if that's the case, if they do end up, they're the ones that end up purchasing WWE, then I think WWE would probably be in good hands with them, better than anybody else.
And
But
they don't want to lose them off of Peacock either, because that's been a
Correct.
major thing for Comcast. So I think Comcast is definitely, for me, I think they're the front runner.
Okay, well,
I'm being perfectly honest.
Okay, this is my next question. So does Comcast own NBC Universal or otherwise?
Yes,
they do.
Okay, so then Comcast or NBC Universal, I think either one of those two. But another thing that I disagreed with Ben with, that he kind of brushed off, which is I think it's more likely to happen than this Rock and Endeavor deal. That is unlikely, but I think who can predict what's going to happen, right? With the past year we've had in wrestling, correct?
Unlike anything else.
I think that people have worked with Vince McMahon, and I mentioned this on the Robert and Soul. People that have worked with Vince McMahon say, well, you can't describe him, or you can't really get Vince McMahon. But just from, I guess, what's been presented and what people have talked about in books and in documentaries and stuff, is that Vince McMahon he's simple and he's petty. I think on the surface of things.
Yeah, ruthless. I would add, maybe it would be the only other thing, right?
Ruthless aggression.
Yeah, he's just
and that's kind of you guys are kind of reinforcing on what I'm going to get at, and I'm going to make my point. It's long-winded, but
no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, go ahead.
But is that I think that if Triple H and Stephanie, if they found the money, and I know it would take a lot of effort, but I don't think it's impossible, because they in the wrestling community or world or bubble, they built a lot of equity, but not necessarily in the business world. I'm talking about Stephanie and Triple H, right? Themselves. But I think if they found the money, they could absolutely purchase WWE, and Vince McMahon would see that. I think deep down inside, Vince McMahon is thinking to Triple H more than Stephanie, because Triple H is running the creative, which is what pushes all of WWE, is if you want the company so bad, if you think you can do this, then do what I did with my father when I bought the company. Bank on yourself, find the money, and buy the company. Vince McMahon did that with his father. He said, I'm going to bank on myself and my ideas and my vision for the company, and bought the company from his dad using loans. And he told his dad, whatever money I make off the Spectrum, which the
balloon
that were
payments
running at the time, I'll pay it back to you, whatever. But if you bank on yourself and you find the money, buy the company and I'll sell it to you. And I think Vince would appreciate that, and he'd be like, haha, pal, your balls dropped, I'm selling you the company. And I think that's more likely to happen than out of all the out there scenarios. Like another one I've heard is they'll find the company to buy it to go private. I think it's more likely than Stephanie and Triple H can find the money and buy the company.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing, bringing that up. It is a full circle moment, and there's a couple pieces that would fall in line. Technically, if Hunter and Steph did buy it, it would become a private company again, in theory.
Okay.
But it solves a couple things. It eliminates the Shane possibility of inheriting the company at that point. Any interest in the company if anything happens to Vince. The factor of Vince insisting that he controls who the company goes to, and with him having the controlling shares, it would make the most sense, because if somebody came in with more money, Vince could still say no.
Yeah.
Right.
Because of Hunter and Steph. Those pieces weirdly would fit into place, but the question is, does Hunter and Steph want it? And I don't know if they necessarily want to own the company.
That makes sense. And I would
question.
also say this. It's important to note, I mean, this thing's going to go for potentially upwards of $2 billion.
Yeah,
and
no way Hunter and Steph
there
has
isn't,
to
you're not going to get a loan to be able to cover that. It would. Now, is there a scenario I think, Ignacio, you're onto something for sure on the trust thing with Vince and Triple H and Steph. Is there an avenue for a consortium, an investment group to come in and help get the money, where they're going to guarantee Triple H and Steph have still major stock in the company, major stake, and they're considered a part of the ownership group, similar to Magic Johnson with the Dodgers, similar to something like that. But I don't know how they could get $1 billion each to even pull that from a business standpoint without a group almost in their corner to support them financially on that side. That's the only problem. Is it's just complicated business wise there.
Here's the one thing, though. This might be the loophole. Do they have to buy the entire company, or do they just have to buy the shares Vince doesn't own?
They have to get enough to be the majority owner.
Yeah, but if Vince still is the majority owner, let's say Hunter and Steph just buy the other part, Vince could leave them the other half, the bigger portion. They're, in theory, only buying 20% of the company.
That is possible.
Because as the majority shareholder, Vince could say yes to that.
That would seemingly take a lot of. That would be controversial, I think.
It would be.
Not in wrestling, but on Wall Street, it would be.
No, would be, but it would make the company public again, or private rather.
It would make them like a subsidiary, technically, of whatever the group that bought the majority was, because.
Vince owns the 80.
That would be even more complicated too, and I'm not exactly an expert on that.
And I was going to say that is Anthony spitballing an idea.
There would be a lot less money involved for Hunter and Steph to get if they're only buying 20% of the company as opposed to 100% of the company. That's all I'm saying.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's interesting. I think Ignacio brought up a great point on the don't rule out Triple H and Stephanie making a play. I actually am in agreement on that maybe I'm not as confident that they're like as close to it maybe, but I do believe that they're not worth ruling out at all, right? They're absolutely going to play a role in this, whether it be as buyers, whether it be as they're say from the board of directors side, they're absolutely going to play a role in this transaction. That is not something to be overlooked. But I think we ought to move along, right?
I did have one question.
Oh, you got one more, Coby? Go right ahead.
It's kind of more to ask, and I think we like outside of NXT, like I guess years ago we knew about Triple H's plans for NXT to go to do NXT Canada, to do NXT Europe, to do NXT Japan and Mexico, and India and all that. I don't know. That's the thing. Vince had a plan and he was betting on himself because he wanted to take the company global. The company's already, I don't want to say as global as it can get, but I don't think Triple H and Stephanie would be as confident they could grow it much more than what they already have.
It's maintained
established right now. Yeah. I think they'd be able to maintain it, but I don't think from going from a New York territory to a state like a United States and then global, there's not really much else of a level to go.
You mean WrestleMania in space isn't happening?
I mean, that's someday. Well, and I will say,
there's no. So my point was, but there's nowhere to go other than down. But I'm saying if you're so confident you can run this company and maybe run it bigger than me and maintain the wealth and make more money than I have, or make it better than I ever could, or whatever, or at least maintain in it, well then find the money and buy it.
It's the full circle. It's the full circle.
Exactly. Then find the money and buy it. Right. But I mean, if they're saying like, well, it's gonna go, there's nowhere to go. If you're saying there's nowhere else to go than down, well then what would be the point of buying it? But if you're confident that you can keep this company where it's at, be more profitable with the product that you want to present. If you're saying that my stuff was hokey and bullshit, well then find the money and buy the company and let's see. And I think Vince would appreciate that, the stones that it would take to do that, and be like, okay, here you go. I'm selling you the company.
Here's your shot. And I hear where you're coming from there too. And then the only other thing that I would add though is there is something intriguing about the combination of scenarios where say Comcast gets on board with Triple H and Stephanie, WME or Endeavor gets on board with the current creative side, and you add the extra financial of a conglomerate that big, or a corporation that big, you add the extra financial resources, the media resources, they negotiate a larger, more global media rights deal where, the WWE still doesn't broadcast live in Japan, which is remarkable. It's one of the Japan loves wrestling. We see it every time right. We all just watched Wrestle Kingdom. Japanese fans love wrestling. Why can't they watch WWE as well? And things like that. That's where I think the combination might actually be the best of both worlds, but it's also a scary thing as lifelong wrestling fans to think about. I think the unknown when it comes to somebody getting their hands on wrestling that may not really know what they are dealing with. I think that also part of it adds to like the angst over the last few days, at least for me personally.
Okay.
When it comes to like what's going to be the future now, right? It seemed very clear, as much as it wasn't, there was a lot of negative stuff surrounding Vince stepping down. It seemed very clear. Okay, Triple H is in charge of creative. Oh, now all of a sudden we're getting some things we wanted, some returns we wanted, some of this and that, and everything seemed so sure. And then all of a sudden, rug pulled by one, newspaper headline essentially. And it's such a fascinating topic to me. It's like we could go almost probably the whole show on this one, but I do feel like we should move along. And so Kenny Omega on Wednesday night defeated Will Ospreay for the IWGP United States title. And the question here is, should Kenny defend that belt in AEW? And it's twofold. Or are there too many belts in AEW already? And he needs to make sure and keep that separate from his AEW on-screen work. Should he be defending the IWGP title over here or only in Japan, especially with this trios match coming up next Wednesday? And I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Let's go top to bottom. Anthony, you ready to go out of the gates, and then we'll go Ignacio, Coby?
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, I don't have an issue with them defending the title on AEW TV because at least New Japan gets something out of it. And I've said this to you privately, Clark. I didn't really agree with them taking the belt off of Ospreay and giving it to Kenny. I felt Ospreay's been doing the best work of his career. He's been loyal to New Japan. I really didn't understand the logic of having him lose to Omega. But if you're going to put the belt on American TV, national TV, I could see it. AEW does have a problem with too many titles. I wrote about it in June. They got between AEW and Ring of Honor, there's 14 belts, and this would be 15, I believe. That's a lot of titles. When you have a lot of championships, and it devalues the titles, because if everyone has a participation trophy, they don't mean anything. They need to mean something. And I think that's a problem because they can't separate Ring of Honor because Ring of Honor does not have a separate TV deal. So they're forced to keeping that on to try to keep Ring of Honor relevant. And now you're adding in another IWGP belt. I mean, you could do stuff with it, but it wouldn't be a long-term thing. Like I wouldn't go months with him having that title and defending it on their TV.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a common complaint. Ignacio, I know you have thoughts on Kenny and this title, so I got to hear that as well, right? But yeah, no, Anthony, I really hear where you're coming from there too. When it comes to, before you go, Ignacio, I'm sorry, just when it comes to the overinflated title picture, the only thing is, in a weird way, I do feel like the IWGP sometimes does outweigh some of those other titles because of the prestige. And so we might get back to that later, but I know Ignacio's ready to go on this with Kenny Omega. So I got to turn you loose for this one.
No, well, just first of all, with the titles, yeah, I agree with you guys. And then the thing is that you also got these old timers that come on and like on their podcast and they say, well, the titles, wins and losses don't matter, and the title's just a prop and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, dude, if you're telling me that you don't give a shit about the titles, then why as a fan should I give a shit then? Like, you know what I mean? And then they come back and they're hypocritical. Guys like, I've heard JR say it, and Bruce and Pritchard and other guys say it's like, well, it's just a prop, and they come back and because they're trying to tell the story of a storyline or whatever. Well, we have to make the title mean something. The title has to go on last or blah, blah, blah. Dude, you just said like 2 hours ago or 3 weeks ago that the titles are props and who gives a shit, nobody should care about them. So it's a lot of flip-flops. So even the old-timers and the old guys can't get their story straight. But yeah, man, I think on one time on Dynamite I saw, like, I counted, it was like 17 titles or something like that ridiculous on the show. Like all the AEW titles were on there, and then the ROH titles, and then the trios titles. And
Oh
then,
yeah.
Well, and then they
FTR
because
was
then
on
they
the
had
show.
they had the Triple H belts in FTR, and then
Yeah, when
Tay-
they had the Triple
and
A
then
ones,
Tay
I
and
think
Sami
the
had
official
mixed
number
on
was
the-
17 titles on the roster.
Has to be.
Yeah, dude, it's just like that's ridiculous, man. It's just like you're watering down, and you're trying to get the general or the casual fans involved, and they don't understand. It's like UFC. Every match is a title match, right? But it's just whatever. But they're diluted, and it just ruins their integrity of their importance. But Ben sent me the sheet, the agenda for the show, and then I saw this, and I was like, oh, man, are you serious? Because I promise that I'll calm down on the language.
No, you're good. You're good. You've actually been doing great.
Because I want Ben and to be able to post stuff and not worry about censorship.
Oh, Ignacio, you're totally good.
But dude, like nobody gives a fuck about Kenny Omega and IWG Japan title, dude. It's not gonna draw money or ratings or more people to watch the show other than the fan base that they already have. And it's just useless. I think him and the Young Bucks should go back to California and Cucamonga and wrestle for Pro Wrestling Chimpanzee or wherever the fuck they came from, and that's it. But if they want to actually do something like productive, what they should do is maybe a month out, 3 weeks in advance, find somebody they want to bring on TV, like Sonata or Zack Sabre Jr. and shoot some vignettes and tell a story about this person, like who they are and why they should care about them, and then shoot some vignettes on the history of the title, and then maybe you might get some fans that might be invested and care about him defending the title on AEW on TV. But other than that, then no, it's not going to bring – nobody's going to get excited about it. It doesn't – nobody cares, right? Unless they're going to do something like that productive, then I don't see a point in it.
Well, what Ignacio said, and this was a strange thing when I wrote a piece on Kenny when they gave him the Impact World title. And I was just looking at the rating numbers. The ratings actually went down when Kenny was the Impact champion, which seems, on its face, you're like, really? Like I had to double check the numbers. So, I mean, there is a valid point there that I don't know if Kenny is a draw outside of that core AEW audience. And it's a question whether or not that was a smart play on New Japan's part to decide to give him the belt to try to, I guess, get more interest in New Japan. I'm assuming that was the logic behind it. So
I hear totally where you're coming from. And go ahead, Coby. Yeah, go right ahead.
Just can you do us a favor, Ignacio? There is feedback coming from when other people are talking. Can you just mute your mic on your phone when you're not talking?
Oh yeah.
It'll help because I don't want to say there was complaints, but yeah, the feedback is gone now. Just wanted to make sure that was covered. So
the only other thing that I would say about the logic that I see in it a little bit is I can see why. And I really agree with what Ignacio said about building to a storyline, building relevance for the belt and all of that. I am on the same page. I think the only way that it does benefit kind of both sides is maintaining the relationship for Forbidden Door. I do think that that's relevant. And if you thought for some reason you could introduce the Japanese audience to another AEW star by having a phenomenal match, maybe even in a loss to Kenny. But if you thought you could do that, I think that's maybe the most juice you could get out of it. But other than that, I'm kind of on the same page, and I'm an AEW fan. I'm not as harsh on Kenny as others. I do see some value in him. I also understand the complaints, but I do see value in his bell-to-bell work. I see value in the way he can work a crowd from time to time, especially when paired with Don Callis. I thought that work was outstanding. That may have had a little bit more to do with Don Callis, but that's not the point. I think there is some relevance, but the problem is the title picture, again, it's so muddy because there's so many belts. And I think if we can just get ROH and AEW separate, that solves a lot of problems. And then that does leave room for the IWGP US title to be defended on an AEW show if they're separate. But the fact that all the belts are on the same show, I think we're kind of in agreement there, guys. Like,
you only have 3 hours of TV, really.
That's just
and,
what you can.
And a lot of people are only watching 2 hours of it. So it's, it makes it even worse.
100%. 100%. The only other thing I might add is if they're going to do Kenny Ospreay on AEW TV, maybe we're talking, because Ospreay to get Ospreay on American soil on live television is a big deal. It was a big deal when he wrestled at the pay-per-view. I'm not the biggest Will Ospreay fan myself. I didn't even really get him at first. The more I watch him, the more I go, okay, I get it. It's not my favorite guy or whatever, but I'm like, I get it, right? Like, talent-wise, it doesn't get any better. And I actually think his promos he's stunned me numerous times this year, and he's kind of turned me from being a skeptic to a fan. I got to give Will Ospreay that much credit for sure. If they're going to do that match on US soil, I think Ignacio mentioned earlier, Zack Sabre Jr., that would be a fascinating match to have in AEW. Zack Sabre versus Kenny Omega. Those type of things on paper are kind of worth it, but I don't know necessarily that you move the needle far enough to make it worth it, by putting that belt on Kenny. And I don't know that it doesn't in the long run hurt things like the ROH television title, the TNT title, borderline the All Atlantic, because it appears as like an upper mid card title. I think when you're doing the coming over from Japan, right? It appears more as like it comes across as in comparison to your own belts. Like, why wouldn't you put one of your own belts on Kenny? Right? It makes it appear to be the more important mid card title, knowing Kenny's history in the company, even if you just want to break it down to that simple, right? Former world champion. And he didn't win our mid card titles. He didn't even go after him. He went and got theirs because it matters more. Why, stuff like that, I think is also just layered into this whole thing. That's my only, as much as I love the Ospreay Omega match, it's funny, like it settled in for a day and then I had a bunch of complaints about similar stuff in the future of the booking and what they're going to do, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Coby, did you have anything to add, by the way, before we,
that's the thing. I'm not going to going into the broken record mode where like we're all saying the same stuff, and that's not a bad thing. That shows, I don't want to say cohesion, but that shows cohesion, that we have similar opinions and we believe the same stuff. But there's too many titles on an AEW programming. That's the thing. Until Ring of Honor is separated, it's good. If you want to say the absence of the Ring of Honor tag titles with the Briscoes can be filled with IWGP US title, sure, whatever the heck you want to say. At the end of the day, it's not going to pump the rating. It's not going to spike a rating at all. It, like, outside of the Kenny Omega fan who's going to say this guy's one of the greatest in the business right now, blah, blah, blah. No one's going to care. At the end of the day, the mistake was made to put the title on Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega getting the win over Ospreay doesn't make no sense. Yes, I don't want to say I knew the full story because I didn't watch the press conference. I know somewhat of how the story was being built, but I also think this is a way to say, hey, well, now we did this with Pac in September. Now it's time we're going to do it this way, and we're going to have Kenny 2 belts again with the trios and then a singles. Yes, Kenny had 3 when he had his belt collector run, but exactly what it says. It's not going to draw a viewership. It's not going to spike. They're not going to get their million because they gave Kenny Omega a singles title. Unless the move is for Ospreay to get a win on a bigger stage in America, which even then that should sour New Japan if you're saying, oh, we'll let Ospreay get the big win on our big show, not on your big show. There's a lot of ways you can look at it. I think that's the only way I think this is worth it, is if Ospreay does beat Kenny to take the title back and take the title off of Kenny. But at the end of the day, like I don't know. I don't know if this was worth it.
And it has to be clean. He has to beat Kenny clean.
I don't think they can have a muddy finish in this rivalry, right, Anthony?
You can't.
They can't.
It has to be clean.
Okay, so finally, let's move on to our final topic of the day. SmackDown was last night. We haven't even talked about it, which is hilarious to me, of course. I thought Sami continued his excellent work on the mic. It made me nervous when Reigns was yelling at him because I just thought like the whole world was crumbling underneath me. For a second, I got all freaked out. Like, are they really going to pull the trigger on this now? And then the night ended with Sami Zayn eating popcorn and spilling popcorn in the locker room with Roman Reigns, and I was giggling because it was just too funny. It was too good. Jumping up and dancing and the popcorn going everywhere, and the excitement on his face when Roman asked him to watch the match with him it tickled me. It was comedy. It was comedy 101. It was good. It was really good. And not comedy in like a, campy, not funny way. Like, it was legitimately funny stuff. And then on the heels of that, we also have our main event for the Royal Rumble. That's not the Royal Rumble set, and that's Kevin Owens versus the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns, the head of the table for the WWE Undisputed Universal title. Did I get that right? First try? That was pretty good. It's tough now with the
Undisputed WWE Universal Champion.
Yeah, you say Undisputed first?
Yes, they did.
Woof, that's tough. That's a big L for me today. I thought I was gonna get that one right first try, but either way, he's got both belts, and he's still with Heyman. He's gonna be taking on Kevin Owens, defending him at the Rumble, and then I think we've discussed this stuff earlier. It seems like the plan's Sami and him at Elimination Chamber, but I really want to get you guys' thoughts on the whole thing. Like, where are they going? Do you think Sami is the backup plan if they don't get The Rock? Does anyone have that? Does anyone hold that opinion? Because I don't know who else is at this point with how over he is. But let's start with Ignacio. Are you ready to go? You want to go, Ignacio?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right. Well, first of all, like yesterday's show, I thought besides the bloodline, the storyline, I think the show overall it felt kind of flat, bro. It just like I don't think it was very good other than what's going on with Sami and Roman and Kevin. Like, I think they'll have a good match at Kevin and Roman will have a great match at Royal Rumble. Absolutely. Both know guys that know what they're doing. They got Paul Heyman involved, so that's going to be great. I'll say one thing is I don't think I mentioned this to Robert and to Chaos and Soul that I don't think that they're putting enough emphasis on the actual Royal Rumble match. Like, Kofi announced he's going to be in it, and I think they had a qualifying match yesterday with Ricochet.
They did.
And it's just like, bro, but nobody, like, usually there's every other year, there's like 3, 4, maybe 5 guys where it's like, man, it could be this guy, or it could be that guy, or maybe it'll be this guy. And then during the match, it's like, well, it could be him. But they haven't been doing a good job as far as building the Royal Rumble match. So I'm more concerned or interested in that because, like, Karrion Kross, and I love Karrion Kross and the work he's doing with Scarlett, but like he's in trying to an angle with Rey Mysterio and really don't know why, other than he thinks he's old and injured and should be taken out. Like, Kross is somebody that should be building. Like, he should be out. Like, I'm gonna win the Royal Rumble.
He should be a Rumble threat and a guy that
everybody out, yeah, and coming out and smashing people, and like Strowman also. It's just like there's not enough emphasis put in the actual Royal Rumble match, and then same thing for the women. Other than Liv Morgan, like, nobody's come out and like, I can't wait. This is my chance to go to headline WrestleMania and punch my ticket and be in the main event and my dreams. And dude, there's just not emphasis put on the actual Royal Rumble matches. It's kind of disappointing because, number one, I'm going to be there. Number two, because Cody, like, everybody said Cody was going to be. Now they're saying, I've been reading that the vignettes with Cody have been leading up to an appearance after the Royal Rumble. that he's not even going to be in the match, and there's still questions about Rock being in it, which I don't think he is going to be in the Rumble. And it's just like, okay, so who are they building for anticipation on who's going to win? Like Randy Orton's still out, I think. He's not healthy yet. I don't know if Matt Riddle's going to be in there because
we haven't seen Edge. We haven't seen Riddle.
So nobody. So it's just like there's no anticipation for the match, and that's like, dude, I'm gonna be there. And the very first match I ever saw was like a Royal Rumble. Was the Royal Rumble match? It was the '89 Royal Rumble.
Oh, it's a great Rumble.
And so I was just like, that it's kind of near and dear to me personally because that's the first wrestling match I ever saw. And then it's just like, that's my concern is there's no emphasis placed on the match. Like whatever you do with Roman and the Bloodline is going to be great. And I do think that that it's going to be eventually we're going to see Roman and Cody at WrestleMania. But how are we going to get there? I don't know. I don't think they're gonna even if it's for a pop, they won't give Sami the chance at the title. They'll have a match. I think they're gonna have their match at an Elimination Chamber. I believe that wholeheartedly. I think we'll get there, but I don't think they're going to give Sami a run for the title. So if you look at from there, then it's just like, well, what do you do with the Rumble match? Who's going to win it? You know, who are they building up? There's no anticipation for it.
Such a good point too, and it's interesting. I feel like most years with the Rumble, you end up with the Rumble match getting the build, and the complaint might be, well, there's not much else on the card. And this year, the script is kind of flipped. The Rumble match, outside of the Cody whispers and a few other things, there's, to your point, there's not been a big build. There's not been a clear, like heel or face that has, put their name in the hat in a way that makes you think, ooh, wow, that's right. I feel like normally at this point in January, we've got like a short list of 5. Like, oh, these 5 could win. And I've got like 1.5, 2.
Yeah.
Like, right?
And they're like maybes because everybody's like Rock and Cody, but it's just like
right.
Cody's like, wow, he's after the Rumble, and then Rock, we don't know even he's gonna be at WrestleMania.
We don't even know if he'll be in the building at all. Like,
so it's just like so okay. So who am I excited to see other than the couple of surprises that might happen that are not gonna win, right? Because I've heard like Matt Cardona and maybe Nick Aldis and maybe here with the old timers, whatever, Logan Paul, right?
Logan,
or Pat McAfee, I think will make an appearance or his return in the Rumble.
That's a great call. I think he will too.
But I mean, who's gonna win? Like, there's no driving force. Like Cross, like I said, Cross should be a threat. Like I'm gonna win. Hey, I'm gonna go in there and toss people out and beat people up, and he should be smashing people over every week. But it's like there's no anticipation for it.
Yeah, I even find it fascinating. Like Judgment Day members, like Damian Priest, hasn't stepped up and tried to act right. Not just like there's big bodies and names that can and be threats in this type of match. I'm fascinated though that it seems that they're all tied up in such separate storylines that the Rumble opportunity has almost been forgotten. I really didn't think of it that way. That's an awesome point, Ignacio. Like, and I know Coby, you had something to say. I'm sorry I cut you off there, but I didn't even think about it that way.
The only thing I like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Last night it was like the first official time they've like showed the graphic. 30 men winning, 30 man Royal Rumble, 30 women Royal Rumble, and they've both put a main event championship match. And I find that interesting per se based on the men's, because that directly doesn't lead to, oh, this is a Roman Reigns match. Take that for what you will. But I almost think, like, yes, we should have driving forces. But directly with the Karrion Kross stuff I guess part of at least Scarlett's contribution to the gimmick and character is that she's like a tarot reader. She knows almost knows the future in a way. So they're not putting their eggs into the Royal Rumble basket, because that's not a point they should be doing right now. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's kind of my direct response to that part of it. But I do agree there are people who aren't like saying anything yet and like, oh, I should be in the Rumble. We saw the Liv Morgan package. We saw the qualifier, and then we also saw Kofi Kingston, and I think Santos will be too. But at the end of the day, I think I don't want to say this is the way it should be, but I like the fact that they're selling us on and we don't know who is going to be in the Rumble. Outside of as of right now, the very few that have announced it. I like that because that really delves into there's 30 men who we really don't know the competitors. Yes, from a standpoint of this isn't building to the Rumble, you can think of it that way. But I do like it to a point because I mean, even when I was having fun years ago with a friend and we were doing like a universe mode in the wrestling games, and it was just like, yeah, we're not gonna announce a single Rumble participant just based on the idea of it should be 30 random men. But I mean, I like that to the standpoint, but then I also see both ways and why you should be building and why there should be that short list of, okay, this guy could win, this guy could win, this girl could win, this girl could win, blah, blah, blah. I see it either way.
For sure. And Coby, I don't even know if Ignacio was saying as much as it was as a result of the build directly to the Rumble match per se, as it is just that it seems like generally guys and girls that we would look at as big threats to win it are already tied up in storylines. So roster-wise, it's so up in the air that it's not even that there's no front runners. There's no right? Like beyond the 3-4 names, it doesn't feel as much like it's 30 people. Hopefully it does by the time they get there, right? By the time they get there, hopefully it feels like a legitimate, it never feels like all 30 people have the chance to win, right? But you know, like by the time we get there, hopefully it feels like there's a deep, man or women for that matter, but hopefully it feels like there's just a deeper field on both sides where it feels like there's multiple competitors that could win, where the final 4 seems to matter, the final 6 seems to matter like it has in years past. That's my fear, is that we get to a final 4 or 6, and the example I would bring up would be the Santino Marella year. It was a bit of a throwaway Rumble because there just wasn't any real threat. And they used the Cobra on the finish on that one. And that's what makes it tough for me. Anthony, I know you've been waiting to talk about the Rumble. You've watched more Rumbles than anybody. Ignacio, go whenever you're ready, but yeah.
For me, you know, this is a weird situation because I don't really recall the last time that they didn't have a December pay-per-view. So there's been this extra long period of time. I'm not as concerned with them not hyping up the Rumble match, only for the simple fact it's been around so long. It's kind of its own entity that you don't necessarily need to focus on it that far. You got a few weeks to build towards it. Quite frankly, I prefer not knowing who's in it. Because one of the surprises, you know, we become jaded when we've been watching this long. We like to know all the ins and outs. We like to know who's going to be in it. The Rumble's the one event I love being surprised. I don't want to know who's in it. I don't want to know when they're coming out. It's a refresher of reminding you why you became a fan. Before you started knowing, oh, they're going to do this or they're going to do, you don't know. I think the Rumble itself, it probably is down to 2 people. It's either Cody or The Rock. Realistically, if this is leading to Roman, that's probably where it's going. I don't think it's going to be for any other championship. I don't believe they're going to break precedent. The Rumble's either for the world title, a title shot, or they've had the championship on the line in the Rumble. So I don't think it's they're going to throw in, oh, this is now for the IC title. Like, I don't think they're going to do anything like that. I think Cody is an interesting factor because I think they could have gone either way. Roman or doing that 4th match with Seth. But now that Seth's injured, that opens it up. I think they've been playing it safe with Cody during the promos, where it's a dividing line between, oh, is he going to go for Seth again? Or is this leading to him fulfilling his destiny of winning the WWE Championship, the belt that his father wasn't able to win? Now that that's not in play, I'm very curious where they're going with this. I don't know who you're going to put in that spot. If The Rock's not in it and you're not going with Cody, I don't know. I'm very curious to see what happens because this is the first Rumble that Triple H is in charge of. So I think that's a factor too. That the air of we don't know who's in it. That might be a Hunter move.
That is a good point.
Well, I mean, it's all a Hunter move, but that might be his motivation of going, we don't want you to know. We don't want to give you the graphic that shows everybody that's in this thing. I like that they're building the undercard for it because most years it's the Rumble and maybe like 1 or 2 matches that matter and the rest they don't care.
I'm like off the top of my head, the only 2 I can really think of like big booked matches at Rumbles pre the Rumble match would be 99 I Quit Mankind Rock. And then I believe it was either 08 or 06 Umaga Last Man Standing with Cena was a Rumble match.
I would go the 04. It was the Shawn Michaels Hunter Last Man Standing.
That's a very good call.
But as far as guys being booked for the Rumble, there have been guys, they've done double duty. They've had feud matches and then been in the Rumble too. So I don't.
Brock did it last year.
That's not that. I mean, that was very common at one point, but like it's not a big deal if Karrion Kross is facing Rey Mysterio. Doesn't necessarily mean that both guys won't be in the Rumble.
Now, I didn't actually think of that either, but I know also Ignacio's getting ready to go too. So like Ignacio, I know you've been waiting on your Rumble take here. It's ready to go again.
Yeah, no, but hello. Okay, so I get that. I get your point, but it's just like it's they can still wrestle and be in the Rumble, but I'm talking about for fan anticipation, for actually wanting to see the match. You need to advertise the stars they're going to be in there because, dude, it's like when I've read several. I can't give you the websites. I wish I could. Maybe Sportskeeda was one, but it wasn't Fightful. But I'll get that later. But
no worries.
It's like when they started saying, "Well, those vignettes," and I actually think now that I think it was Uncle Dave Meltzer that fucking might have said it also. I'm pretty sure it was on the Observer, but it's saying, well, now they're saying Cody Rhodes is not going to be in the Rumble, dude. A lot of people bought tickets.
I mean, really?
Yeah.
They thought they were going to see Cody in the Rumble. So it's just
like, I mean, even then, that just sorry to interrupt, but I've never seen it. So I mean, take that for what you will.
I do hear where you're both coming from though, because I hear where Ignacio is coming from on the like. It is nice to know that there's like potential front runners almost in the Rumble for anticipation. But then I also understand where Anthony's coming from on the surprises are some of the best parts of the Rumble. And I think it's a combo of the two. I also just hope, because I think that's the one thing I would add, Ignacio, is I do think thankfully they've got 2-3 weeks, right? 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
Essentially, let's just hope that they booking along the way there on Raw and SmackDown can get us to a place where we feel like there's 4 or 5 names that could really win this thing.
Well,
I don't know that they can necessarily do that quickly, but that would just be nice.
I definitely think as far as if rumors are going out there that Cody might not be in it, that could be just to throw us because everyone expects him or Rock to win it. So I could easily see them putting that out there going, well, Cody's really not going to be in the Rumble. Now, I could see them not putting him in there to prevent a Daniel Bryan situation where everyone expected him to win that year and he wasn't in it. So I could see them doing that too because they booed Rey Mysterio because he came out of 30.
That's true.
That's entirely a possibility, but I don't know who you put in there at that point.
And before that, who's ever who's ever booed Rey Mysterio?
I know, it's like the first time ever.
They were laughing about
how was that even possible?
Did he get booed as a part of the Filthy Animals?
WCW?
No, that would have been my only guess.
No,
that would have been my
only
people
guess. Oddly, kind of liked the Filthy Animals. Kobe is weird. That sounds like
they
didn't like Ray losing the match, but like the group was good enough that like they were kind of fun, and with the entrance and everything, like. Nobody necessarily liked Ray being in the Filthy Animals, but I think most people that were watching at the time liked the members so much that they didn't get the heat they would have gotten in a different era.
The thing is, it wasn't a gimmick. Ray was being booed for nothing that he did. He was put in that spot. It had nothing to do with what Ray was doing.
So one more thing with this is that, I mean, right now I don't have a lot of faith, but it's just like, how you said there's angles going on and they're occupied with getting over the angles and not focusing on the Rumble match, you can incorporate and they've done it before. They incorporate the angles in the Rumble match.
It's so true.
Like you can have, so like I mentioned the thing they can do with Cross, and then they can do the thing where Sammy gets in the Rumble somehow because he's gonna protect the title match against Roman. Because like, well, if I get the title match, Tribal Chief, don't worry, I'll
lay down for you. Yeah,
I'll protect you, whatever.
Yeah.
And Solo could get in there, and then they can have like the comedy guy, like what's his name? He's hurt.
Truth.
An example, like R-Truth. Like R-Truth could get in there. Hey, my hero's John Cena, and he main evented WrestleMania, so I want to be in there and do that deal. And then NXT, they can go to Shawn Michaels and be like, hey man, I want to be on this is my dream. This is why I'm here. How do I get in that match?
Carmelo.
Have like
Carmelo would be the smart choice.
Yeah, somebody from NXT to go be in the Rumble. So
you can Breaker, even if you get Breaker.
Whoever.
Right?
Yeah. But I just think they needed to take different avenues to build anticipation, and hopefully they do starting on Raw, but I just don't have a lot of faith in it right now.
Well, and to your point, I think one of the best rivalry builds of all time they did through the Rumble, which was setting up for the Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels WrestleMania match. Sean, that all they built into them meeting in the Rumble match, through the Rumble match, to the Mania match, to the rematch. And I actually totally, it's spot on there.
Isn't one of the best, and I forget exactly which Rumble it was, but the final two was Shawn and Hunter, and Shawn and Taker. And I think my favorite line that I ever heard somebody said, it was the only match within a match.
It was.
That was like was
the one Taker won. Was that 08? No,
I think it was 08. I thought it was that, but I didn't want to say because I wasn't sure on that. But I think it was 08.
08 or 7, I can't remember.
Yeah, and then a couple years down the line is the infamous, Taker Shawn series of 2.
2007.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it built to the 2-match series essentially, right? If you really think about it,
because they hadn't.
It was uber long term, but it was just built through the Rumble. And I agree with Ignacio on that. There's no reason not to have those rivalries be a part of spots in the Rumble where why have them necessarily booked already in an undercard match if you can have them come in at 4 and 6 and advance that storyline through a match that has the magic of the Royal Rumble. That makes a ton of sense to me. And Anthony, I know you had one more thing to say.
No, I do think the Rumble is going to play a role in the whole bloodline break apart. I could totally see Sami accidentally eliminating some members of the bloodline. It's the cracks are going to be there. It's probably leading to Elimination Chamber, but I don't know. Do they do Sami and KO against the Usos at WrestleMania, which was the rumor, or do they drag it after that? I don't know. That's been one of the most interesting parts about the bloodline is as much as we think we know what's going to happen, we're not exactly certain because it's changing constantly.
Especially with the Rock factor at play, man.
Yes.
Like, anything can happen there. And I think, we're coming up on an hour here, so I was going to wrap this up. But if anyone had one more thing to add before we go about the Rumble, if not, thank you on behalf of everybody here. WR Daily Broadcast will be back same time, same place tomorrow. Similar crew, but as always, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Peace out.